Good evening, there you are. I was hiding behind the clapperboard. I'm Peter Stewart. Welcome to Livestream Insiders. In this week's show, gosh, we cover all sorts of platforms. We're talking about Periscope and Twitter and Facebook and Twitch, plus MimoLive. Plus we're going to be looking at all sorts of different stats which have been published over the course of the week. Plus LiveU Solo. I'm not doing it by myself. I couldn't possibly do that. Krishna Day is, of course, here to help and support and guide and indeed lead Livestream Insiders.
You've had such a great week and I'm really looking forward to the first part of this show because you were at two very specific events and it was a place where there was lots of journalists and media there. And because you guys are part of the Livestream Insiders community, you, like me, get to hear some of the things that journalists and the media are talking about that you might be able to look to put forward. And I'm really interested in terms of some of the things that you tweeted about, Peter, that are actually coming up. If you've not been with us before, my name's Krishna. This is Peter. Together we are Livestream Insiders. We've been together. We've known each other almost 3 years now. This is our third year of streaming, a 30-minute show, basically to give you the latest Livestream tools, technology, updates, platform updates, and also we'd like to give you ideas in terms of case studies and best practice. So if you're experimenting or wanted to look at using live content as part of your communications, that could be for internal comms, it could be for external communications, marketing, social selling, crisis management, employee engagement, then you're in the right place. And there's an archive of the show. You'll find it over on YouTube. You'll find it also on Facebook, and you'll find it at livestreaminsiders.com. But with that, I'm going to pass it straight to Peter because I'm excited to hear about the things that he was discovering at two events that he was at this week. One of them was an event hosted by Twitter, and they brought somebody over from the US. I saw that in a community I'm in, and also saw the post about it. But also there was a great conference that went on where, again, Peter, in fact, in this one, was speaking about using live video. He was on a panel about that. So over to you, Peter.
Absolutely, Krishna. Thank you for your kind words, and thank you for watching, whether you're watching us live or on the recorded version. Yes, so over the course of the week, if you were following my tweets, then you would have found out a couple of really big, really interesting bits of information about live streaming platforms. So it was Tuesday night. I was at a very exclusive event at Twitter HQ, which is just off Leicester Square in London town, just round the corner there. And there we had a presentation which was hosted by Evan Hansen, who's the editor-in-chief of Periscope. So it was a Q&A, and it was also to talk to us about Periscope in general, trying to get some more publishers, more journalists specifically involved with live streaming on Periscope/Twitter. Obviously, those terms are a little bit interchangeable. And Evan, really nice man. He'd flown in from San Francisco for that event and a few other events as well. Let me just tell you that it was, so exclusive. I would be surprised if there were more than 50 people in the room. And we got a nice little swag bag, but the main point of it was to explain the values, the virtues, and the significance of using a platform like Periscope/Twitter, particularly for journalists. And they're at pains to point out there were 3 people from Twitter live video who were involved in the presentation, plus somebody from BuzzFeed video on a panel, and also our good friend John D. McHugh, who I'm sure Krishna will remember. He's been to a few conferences that we've been to, so he's involved with live and recorded video as well. And talking about how Periscope and Twitter are particularly good for those situations where there is breaking news, for breaking news situations for journalists. So they kind of said that Facebook, yes, for the softer and more perhaps family orientated content or businesses, but Twitter and Periscope together, because it appears in that timeline, because it is much more easy to share to a wider group of people outside your initial network, then Twitter Periscope was the one for news that they were suggesting. So lots of conversations, lots of Q&As going on about the awkwardness of having hearts on a screen, for example, when there is a story which is perhaps particularly disturbing or distressing, about the comments that appeared on the screen in similar circumstances as well. But also what Evan was talking about was kind of slipped in, and that was how there's going to be much more integration into Twitter of the Periscope app. Now, various functionalities, but particularly he was keen to point out, certainly afterwards, even if it wasn't immediately obvious during the course of the presentation and the discussion, was particularly with discoverability. Now, that goes some way to allaying our concerns, which we've had on the programme over the past well, we're into our third year, of course, of doing this programme. But discoverability, I think, inside Twitter will make it much easier for people, obviously, to discover our content, to share the content, to view the content. If there is some kind of way, and ask Krishna her views on this in a moment as well, but if there was some kind of way that people were more able, it was easier for them to discover publishers' content, some breaking news stories that have actually been tweeted out via Periscope into the Twitter timeline. I think that would be really, really valuable. Obviously, there is quite a distinction between Periscope and Twitter. You can broadcast from Periscope and bounce it through to Twitter, where people only on Twitter and don't actually have the Periscope app can then be watching your Periscope, although they can't comment and they can't press the screen for hearts, or you can just keep it inside Periscope and that much smaller, much more distinct community. So it has kind of got those two distinct ways of operating. But I think, Krishna, I think you would probably agree that this is something which has been lacking in Twitter for a while, that discoverability, some kind of archiving, some kind of better way to search. At the moment, of course, in Periscope, you can search through the hashtags, through the different columns on their page, through things like sport or news or different kind of hobbies. You can also search on that map, which was quite controversial when it started. But in Twitter itself, essentially, once it's kind of slipped down your timeline, there's very, very little you can do to find content that you're interested in.
It's really interested in terms of how you could actually discover content. I know that's been a major issue for many people. I think the other thing that I'd say is that Twitter search is actually much better than perhaps people give it credit for. And if you're really astute, as you should be with any content digitally, with your keywords or a hashtag, for example, then people should be able to discover content there. And you can see live content in Twitter search. But really interesting. I was, though, intrigued about a particular quote that you shared, Peter.
Gosh, you caught me on the hop there.
Oh, well, let me share it here. You put it on Twitter, and let me just post it up for you. So this is from Evan Hansen. And it's about all the Periscope functionality is to be moved into the Twitter platform over the course of this year. Live is becoming a more visible and potent part of Twitter.
Yes, now subsequently, because actually I met up with Evan on the second day of conferences at a completely different event, which I'll come on to in a few moments' time. Actually, he did row back a little bit from that. So whether it was whether he misspoke or whether I misheard, but yeah, he was very, very keen to point out it was particularly about the discoverability part of the functionality. Quite how he could have misspoken to such a degree, or how I would have misheard to such a degree, I'm not entirely sure. But obviously, as he made approaches to me afterwards, subsequently 24 hours later, and said, well, I was particularly talking about the discoverability, then that's how it must stand, of course. However, I think it was really, really interesting. They do say that, you know, they are two completely different formats. They are completely different apps. But even to start integrating a little bit more, that discoverability maybe is the first step on the route. And people who I spoke with afterwards, the 50 people there and the couple of hundred people who were at an event 24 hours later, were, well, you know what? They were they were slapping their heads a little bit, those who I spoke with, and said it is just so confusing to have the Periscope app and the Twitter, and not even call the Periscope app Twitter Live. People are a little bit scared of it. They've heard different things. They're comfortable with Twitter. And of course, you can go live through Twitter as well. Evan pointed this out to that group on Tuesday night. And still, several people were a little bit confused that you could do some stuff on both apps, which is the same. But if you go live in one, you can't do X. And if you go live in the other, you can't do Y.
I do think in terms of Periscope, and we've talked about this before, certainly from a PR perspective, a crisis communications perspective, would be the place I'd recommend, because it allows you to do things like, have a degree of functionality in terms of turning comments off. There are times that you don't want comments on a broadcast that you're doing, let's say if you're in a situation of crisis, but also, there are different things that you can do in terms of, do some testing via Periscope. You can do private tests just to specific groups and get some feedback from people, or just share content there. I do want to pick up a comment there for Patricia, and it's a great point you raised, Patricia, because this is something I put on my website, and I don't often use Periscope much these days, but what she's commenting is that I hope that most people know. I think they probably don't, or if they did know, they've forgotten, Patricia. So thanks for raising this. Is that you can add the Periscope icon like a little widget to your website, and it turns red when you go live. And if you embed Twitter on your website, your Periscope broadcast will appear live as well. So yes, you could of course embed a widget where all your recent tweets come up, so your live stream is there. But there is a little button there that you can put onto your site that goes live. And of course, all the other things that we would often talk about is pre-promote it if you can do. Tell people about it. Direct people to where you want them to watch. And the great thing is people don't have to be logged in to Twitter or to Periscope to watch your content and to have a look at that's going on. If they want to make comments or leave hearts, it's a bit different. It's a bit more challenging to easily access content always on Facebook. But on to the next, because that was the one where you were speaking at, and it was NewsRewired you were at, I think, Peter, wasn't it? In terms
Absolutely. The NewsRewired conference is held 2 or 3 times a year. It's always in London, and usually at the Reuters building at Canary Wharf in London. So very prestigious venue, very prestigious event. They have some pretty high up industry leaders, people who've actually been involved with pushing the envelope a little bit as far as journalism and news, particularly with technology and different apps and ways of working and that kind of thing. And I was on a panel all about live streaming with a couple of people, one from Reuters, somebody else from Bloomberg, and also Rich Evans, who's the strategic partnership manager for Facebook. So in 2 days, I had top people sitting next to me, and I was talking with one from Twitter, Periscope, and the other from Facebook. And I did a presentation about how journalists can use live streaming in their line of work, as you might imagine. But what came out from Rich Evans, and he did it as part of his presentation, and almost just kind of dropped it in, and I was really surprised how he did it. It was very low key, and there weren't gasps around the room at all, and I'm not entirely sure whether many people picked up on it or realised its significance. Sidebar, of course, live streaming is very, very much in its early days for many, 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 many people. And he said, coming soon to Facebook, number 1, multi-camera phone capabilities. Now, he didn't go on about that. He didn't give any more details, but what I reckon, and a couple of others I spoke to after the event, reckon what that is at one scene, at one situation, to be able to tether phones, 2 or 3 phones, perhaps on the sharing a code, or maybe on the same Wi-Fi signal or something of that nature. So somebody can be a producer, they're going to be calling it Facebook producer, to be able to switch between those different camera angles in one Facebook Live feed. I think that is going to be really, really interesting. And I should think that the good folks at Switcher Studios and Switcher Go are probably getting a little bit nervous. Of course, Krishna is our tech expert, and she'll be able to, I'm sure, rattle off a couple of other companies who also have that kind of capability on that platform that feeds through to Facebook. So that's one, multi-camera phones, multi-cameras or phones. Number two, logo placement, which again is what Switcher Go does, which I've used many, many times to be able to hard burn a logo into the corner of your screen. Number three, video play-in function as well. Again, Switcher Go do this, and I've used that platform when I've been doing live streaming through to Facebook as well. So you can have a pre-recorded piece of content, whether it be video or whether it be an image, and be able to tap the screen and play that in live on location. That's really good because it not only gives a different kind of aspect, a different bit of content for your live stream, but also it means as a journalist, or maybe in another kind of situation, you can actually then mute your microphone, walk to a different location or a different angle, and as soon as that pre-recorded bit is finished, you can come back and you can start broadcasting again live, as it were, and it's much more televisual. So boy oh boy, those three different things, multi-cameras, logo placement and play-in function, I think those are going to be really, really important. I'm really excited to learn more about those and to try and catch them as soon as possible when they are issued.
It doesn't take everybody such a long time to get access to it, Peter, because I know some people are actually still struggling with access to features that rolled out for some of us a long, long time ago. Actually, I just want to point out that all of the links that we've been talking about and resources, so in fact, I've done a curation of some articles that came out of the NewsRewired conference. One of them actually is by Peter, will be in the links. So we actually curate all the links, all the resources that we talk about. And if you check back on the show, soon after that it's actually finished the live stream, you'll find a link to that then. Peter, one of the things, I've got a side question, so thanks Len for joining us, and he was just saying, there's two comments here. He saw that you were being interviewed for a report. I think you had a couple of interviews, Peter, that day, didn't you?
Yeah, absolutely. So I was interviewed. Yeah, I was interviewed by three or four different people over the course of NewsRewired on Wednesday evening. About live streaming, yes, and you're absolutely right. I can make those the links to a couple of those certainly available.
I think one of them's just been published. I saw it in a group that you and I are both a member of today. I think it was a montage, and the other one, I'm sure, when that becomes available, that can be posted. So I'm sure Peter will post them here on the page.
And also, I'd like to say hello to Neil, because Neil Dewson Smythe, or Neil Dewson Smith. Neil, I'm not entirely sure how you pronounce the last part of your name. We are going to be speaking about Neil's initiative. He's otherwise known as Sergeant TCS a little bit later on in the programme. So thanks for joining us.
And I'm just checking also another comment. So this is a question to everybody here. And this is something that Len has just asked. Off topic, because it's actually a good space for us to talk about this, Len, because we're going to come on to some technology updates. And he's saying, have you seen the Marantz turret, a tool for audio and video podcasting and live streaming? I personally haven't. I don't know if you have, but if you've come across it and you've got some thoughts on it, do put a comment here. Have you had an opportunity to test it? Have you had an opportunity to put it to work in your organisation? Because it looks like Len's interested. Len, if you've been using it, let us know what your thoughts are. So let's take a look at some live video updates in terms of tools and technology. I'm going to have a quick run through a number of things here. And forgive me as I return to my notes for the first one, because I want to make sure I get this absolutely accurate. So a little time ago, Twitch is a platform that we've talked about a number of times. Twitch have been actually updating their community guidelines, and this is really relevant because we've talked about this, whether it be on Periscope issues or YouTube issues in terms of what people comment about. So what they did is they posted a link to a blog post which covered a lot of FAQs And I'm just going to highlight a couple of them, but as I said before, you'll be able to get access to all of the details there. So if you're considering using Twitch, and we talked last time about the fact of Twitch is hugely expanding in Europe. They've actually expanding into a number of markets with people being placed in those markets. So it might be a platform that you want to use as a brand to connect with an audience, or it might be a platform that you want to use as part of your live streaming for your own entrepreneurship or your organization. So the article goes through a number of key areas, particularly around providing a safe place for people to be. So what does Twitch consider as hateful conduct? So it goes through the usual things that you'd expect as in most social media platforms and video platforms. So that could be everything from race or ethnicity through to sexual orientation or age and so on. But they go on and they say, what should I do about viewers exploiting elements of my stream in terms of things with text to speech, to harass, be hateful, or post sexual content? So I'm not going to go through all of the answers there, but I thought that was really interesting that they're picking up this, text to speech element. And also they talk about to what extent am I responsible for my community? So that's really interesting. Also, if you think about Facebook and you think about Facebook groups, which I know, was one of the topics that came up at the NewsRewired conference, where some organizations, some publishers have actually got a whole number of Facebook groups. I think if I remember rightly, the Daily Mirror actually has got about 5 different Facebook groups around different subject topics. The Economist, for example, we've talked about that before, also has a Facebook group. So if they're, hosting that, how do they make sure that, they're responsible for that community? They're going to do that with moderators and people managing that community. On Twitch, it says creators are role models and leaders of the communities they create or foster around them. Creators should consider the consequences of their statements and actions of their audiences. We ask that you make in good faith effort to quell any efforts from those in your community to harass others. Twitch should not be used to incite, encourage, promote, facilitate or organise hateful conduct or harassment, whether on or off Twitch, and will suspend communities, organisations and individuals that do so. We've talked about, as I said, YouTube in terms of specific people who've actually, got things have been challenging, let's say, in terms of what they've been posting about. So that's really interesting that they've come out there. They said, why is Twitch moderating off Twitch conduct? And they said, we recognise harassment against Twitch community members can sometimes originate off Twitch. And so they're actually looking to moderate and verify harassment around that. And they actually go on to how they're doing it. And they also talk about clothing. So what should you wear when you're live streaming? And they said, we recommend creators wear attire that would be publicly appropriate for the context, location and activity. For example, workout clothes if you're in a fitness stream, or a swimsuit if you're actually talking from a public beach. And they go on and talk about something actually that the Royal Academy, we talked about this a few weeks ago, and I talked about the fact of, I thought this was quite courageous of the Royal Academy of Arts actually to do a life drawing live stream. And they said, I'm an artist, I want to paint a nude portrait not intended to be sexual. Can I stream my nude figure drawing? And they said, we do not yet provide sufficient tools for viewers to limit their exposure to nudity and mature content. If you go back to watch that live stream from a few weeks back, we actually put a link to it. And in fact, the Royal Academy addressed that in their comments on their live stream, that the person there was actually, did have something on. So worthwhile having a look at if you're using Twitch in terms of making sure that you're familiar with their community guidelines. And a link to that blog post they did with an FAQ will be available for you in the curation. A couple of other updates. Now, this one I haven't tried. I do recommend it if you've got a Mac. It's a platform called EcamLive, and I know they've had some great results for people in terms of the features that they've got, and it's very accessible. Of course, there are other live stream platforms available for Mac only broadcasts, and we've talked about a number of them. One we've actually got coming up in a moment, but they actually have just released an update of version 2.1. and there were some really interesting features that are available which are worthwhile having a look at. And one of the ones that actually was of interest to me was actually the shape of your stream. So that's worthwhile taking a look at, particularly if you want to do a live stream that's square. That's been available for people for a little bit of time. But you know that the square video on Facebook, if you're going to use EcamLive for Facebook, that gets a lot of great traction. So that might be one that you want to take a look at. The next update I have for you is MimoLive. MimoLive, again, I've actually interviewed the founder, creator of MimoLive, and another good platform if you're using your Mac, and they've got a lot of work that they've done, particularly with schools. So if you're looking at early reports, morning reports as they're called in the US, this software has been built really for that audience in terms of it being very, very easy to use. What caught my attention this week is they've got some really attractive lower thirds, animated lower thirds that are available for you to purchase. So if you're a MimoLive user, go check that out. And then the fourth thing I want to tell you about was the Facebook video uploader. Why is this important for you as a live streamer? Well, once your live stream has finished, then you can go back and you can edit it. I always do that. I always put a little bit more detail. I'll put the links to the show notes in there, and other things that you'll have seen I've done. I would have put captions in there. And so do check on your Facebook pages that you may have access to this. I have this now on Livestream Insiders. I actually saw it as soon as the show was finished last week, and I went to edit. So I immediately created an article with a tutorial about how to use it. And I did feature in that article, I need to go back because I've looked at it again today. And one of the things that I was a bit disappointed with is that you could actually put a little messenger icon so people can comment on Messenger from your video, and so directly into Messenger for you. That might be an important element. It certainly is for me in terms of being able to have direct communication as part of my process and part of the process for Livestream Insiders. Well, I didn't see it there last week. It is now there, so I'm happy about that. But another new thing that I saw there today, which I will update the article about, I've got a video and an article all about how to use this new feature, is you can actually now post secret videos. So secret videos, now you can actually say in terms of access, who do you want to see this? And so you could actually just have this given to people having a link to it. That's interesting, isn't it? Because if you think about YouTube or you think about Vimeo as platforms, Vimeo, I can give a secret link. I can give a password protected link. On YouTube, I can give an unlisted video. So when I upload videos to YouTube, I'll make it initially private. I'll then might want to make it unlisted if it's for a client. If it's for our show where I repurpose the content, it's public. So I haven't had a chance to practice with that because it's only just appeared on my account today. Now, this is not on all of our pages, but I also know that this new design for the Facebook video uploader has been available to some people for some time. So when I posted about this last Monday, then some people actually, or one person particularly said, oh gosh, I've got that and I've had it for, months. Whereas some of us are only getting it in this last week. And it's certainly not on all of my pages. But if you're curious about what it means, there's really no new features other than that one that I saw today, which is for secret video. So I need to go off and test that. So that's this week's update of all the tech news in terms of platform updates.
We always like to bring you the latest stats, and fortunately Livestream.com has compiled what they call 62 must-know live video streaming stats. Now, they say there are 62. There are 62. However, some of them do seem to be a little bit old, and some stats are to just do with video rather than live streaming video, and other live streaming stats are to do with, the live streaming TV. So proper professional TV channels who happen to be live streaming their drama or their documentary or their sport, which I think is something we touch on occasionally here in Livestream Insiders, but it's not usually what our kind of main area of interest is. Let me highlight three of these out of the 62. Number 2 happens to be Breaking news makes up 56% of most watched live content, with conferences and speakers tied with concerts and festivals in second place at 43%. So that kind of stat may help you perhaps get a little bit of a contract with somebody that you're pitching to. Fun fact number 3, live video is more appealing to brand audiences. 80% would rather watch live video from a brand than read a blog, and 82% prefer a live video from a brand over social media posts. And fun fact number 7, video quality, the most important factor for 67% of viewers when watching a live stream broadcast. It's quite surprising, and I suspect what that probably is because most people discount the audio quality until there is no audio there at all. And of course, as we've said in the past, if you've got video without audio, it may mean that the video is totally incomprehensible. If you've got audio without video, it's essentially a radio show or a podcast, and usually you can work your way through, you can understand what is going on. But anyway, there's a whole stack of other stats for your delight and delectation, courtesy of livestream.com. As usual, the link will be in the show notes soon after this episode ends.
One of the questions I got asked very recently was about different platforms for live streaming. And I know it's a question that Peter often gets asked as well. And a tool, I should say, that actually I referenced because it's getting a lot of interesting and good feedback, and I've seen a number of organizations use it, is LiveU Solo. And I put that in my resources to the person who was asking me the question. And lo and behold, what does Peter discover this week? It's an article which is about a review by Kenny McMillan, who's a featured author on Pro Video Coalition, and he reviewed the LiveU Solo. Now, you're talking about $1,000 in terms of this tool, but where it really holds its own is if you're mobile. Because one of the things that often we'll talk about is the quality of your live stream is so dependent on your access to your internet connection. So if I'm out and about, I will always have my own mobile broadband with me. Now, there's no guarantee that I'll be able to get access to it. So if I'm in a venue which has got thick walls or is in a different or difficult location, I may not be able to do that. But I never rely on the resources. Let's say I'm having a conference and I've agreed to cover some content from that conference. I won't rely on the conference Wi-Fi unless they've got one specifically for people to use as, media creators. And that's just because usually conferences just cannot cope with the amount of people who need access to it. That being said, MojoCon that Peter and I were at last May, did an amazing job because they had hundreds of people there who were creating content and live streaming as well. And yet the Wi-Fi absolutely was stellar. It stood up and it stood against the test of time. It was very, very good. More on that conference in a few months' time. We'll be back, so we'll be letting you know about how to get tickets for that once they become available. However, back to LiveU Solo, this is definitely something you want to look at in terms of it really helps you connect to a good internet connection. The solos they actually talk about in the article is actually very easy for us to set up. Little knowledge needed in terms of choices of where you can stream to, include YouTube, Facebook, Periscope, Twitter, Twitch, and many others. And they're also connected not just with mobile devices, but they are able to connect with, let's say you want a pro camera. So if you want to use a cinema camera, this particular one was a Canon cinema camera that they connected. Of course, you can use other cameras too, because you can connect to the XLR input. You also have got the ability to put in studio microphones. So that's something to take a look at. Really interesting to see that as an article. I know a number of organizations because I actually follow LiveU Solo and I get their email communications as well. And they're constantly creating little case studies of organizations who've used them and it's pretty worldwide access now. And what they do is they actually very interestingly share with us, okay, are you going to the Olympics? So it's, let's say you're covering news as a news organization, you can, make sure you get access to this now. or if you've got another, let's say, a sporting event, we often talk about sports and live streaming, then that might be something you want to look at. And I do know that of a number of media agencies in Ireland who've been using it as well, and a number of agencies who have been using it for creating content for their clients in the UK. So take a look at LiveU Solo, particularly if you're going to be looking to stream from difficult to access areas in terms of internet access, because that's so important for you to be able to do. It's definitely worthwhile putting on your list to explore. And thanks, Peter, for picking up that article.
Krishna, thank you, and a couple of comments on the stream, thanking you for all your tech tips and the updates there. So, of course, Krishna is the queen of live streaming tech. And finally, to finish off, is something that we've spoken about before, but inevitably not perhaps as often as maybe we could have done, and probably not since the last time it happened, which was this time last year. And that is International Don't Stream and Drive Day. The number of drivers using those live streaming platforms, some of which we've mentioned during the course of the last 35 minutes or so. More and more platforms, more and more people, more and more silly fools thinking it's okay to be live streaming while they are driving. Of course, there are different rules in different countries around the world, but certainly in the UK, it is there are very strict rules about using your mobile phone handheld while you are driving. Now, friend of the show, Sergeant TCS. I don't know whether Sergeant is still here, otherwise known as Neil Jewson Smith, is the man behind it all. He saw that there was an opportunity to use live streaming for police engagement, but also noticed a couple of years ago when he's kind of kicked all this off back in 2015 that also there were lots of risks about live streaming as well, particularly when you are behind the wheel and hurtling down a road with a ton or so of metal around you. So the first awareness day was in 2016, and lots of other 999, lots of other blue light organisations got behind him, not just the police, but fire and ambulance crews as well. And Neil has been speaking about his initiative at various conferences, both here in the UK and elsewhere around the world, and also has received a few awards as well for his troubles and for his great initiative, kicking the whole thing off. And now the day has been embedded into the police calendar. It is now official. It is National International Don't Stream and Drive Day 2018. When is it? It's April the 3rd, which I believe it all happens. And also there's a bit of a challenge between the UK and the USA, one of these Twitter Thunderclaps, to try and see how many people can tweet the same message about don't stream and drive on that day. So if that's something that you want to get involved with, and frankly we all should, as we're all part of this streaming community, then you can go to don'tstreamanddrive.com. And Sergeant TCS is there giving his words of advice about keeping safe. Not only you, of course, you're the one driving, you could have a crash, but also, of course, other people as well who you may leave in your wake.
It's great that this is the third year of this initiative. And what I've done in our notes is actually put a link into an interview that I did with Neil a year ago for Don't Stream and Drive Day 2017. And so if you want to know a little bit more behind the context of it, and also at that stage, there was some new legislation that was coming in the UK around driving and with mobile phones. So we covered that as well. So if you're interested in this whole area, and it's certainly one that both Peter and I are passionate about, and I still can't believe it when I see well-known people who should know better who are actually streaming from their cars. And, you know, saying, oh, I'm not paying attention to the comments, at which stage they're looking at the comments. I'm not paying attention to the comments. So stay safe. But I also should say, actually, we forgot to mention two other things. Thank you to those of you who joined us from the US, because you've had 1 hour less sleep today because daylight savings time changed for you. So you might have seen our little video that we posted about that. So for 2 weeks, we're out of kilter. So we really appreciate you joining us. an hour early. The clocks don't change in UK and Ireland until the 25th of May. So there's 2 times a year that we're out of kilter, now and at the end of the year. And then we're back to our usual time differences. But the other thing is, for those of you who, like me, are a mum, or those of you who have a mum who's still around or not, I hope you've had a wonderful Mother's Day. I've got 3 daughters who were all very busy today, so we didn't celebrate today, but we celebrated yesterday, and we're going to be celebrating in a week's time, in terms of with different things. So it's quite nice that I get a Mother's Day month. Much nicer than a Mother's Day day. But I have to say the roads have been very busy with people going out visiting. So if it is Mother's Day in your part of the world, I hope you have had a great day. And if your mum's no longer with you, like my mum is no longer with us, I'm sure you're thinking about them too. So we had to close off with that. But anyway, with that, Peter, let's tell people about the next show.
Absolutely. You know what? Every Sunday night, 7 o'clock UK time, Greenwich Mean Time, Universal Standard Time, we kick things off with Livestream Insiders. We've been doing this for the last 124 weeks, so well into our 3rd year now, and we thank you so much indeed for watching and participating live, your comments, your thoughts and suggestions, your feedback, and also the comments that you give us when you watch the recorded show as well. We like to keep you abreast of all the tech changes, the updates to some of the platforms, some fantastic case studies, how people are using live streaming around the world. And this week we mentioned Facebook Live and also Periscope and Twitter and some of the other bits of tech as well. We talked about Twitch and Mimo and LiveU Solo. We've also talked about a few ethical issues as well with that Don't Stream and Drive campaign too. And also we threw in a couple of stats, and all the show notes are available for you, so you can go and use the content that we have found in your own presentations, your own pitches for business, or for your own bit of light reading, should you so wish. We are back at the same time next week, Livestream Insiders. You can follow Krishna Day and you can follow me, Peter Stewart, on Twitter over the course of the week as well. We're often posting the updates as we find them, or as I say, come back and join us on the programme where we pull it all together for you in a little over 30 minutes. Until then, thank you for the loan of your eyes and your ears, and wherever you are, have a great week ahead. Good night.